You're making a mistake right now, and I say that with love. A mistake is this: you think the pain you're in means God is still testing you, still stretching the fight, still asking you to hold on a little longer. But listen to me closely. What if the battle you keep bracing for is already over? What if you're bleeding emotionally, mentally, spiritually, not because the war is still raging, but because you haven't realized the war has ended? I need you to hear this with your full attention. Not halfway, not while scrolling, not while planning what you'll do next. I'm talking to you, and I'm not here to waste your time with recycled words or empty hype. This message is sharp, intentional, and timed. If you've been exhausted for no clear reason, if you've been tired, even after resting, if you've been praying the same prayers but feeling no more strength to fight, then you need to stay with me until the very end. I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to wake up already tired, to feel like every day is another round in a fight you didn't sign up for. I know the pressure of always being strong, always pushing, always surviving. And I also know what it feels like when God whispers, not loudly, not dramatically, but firmly, enough. This chapter is finished. Here's the truth most people miss. God doesn't just start battles. He ends them. And when he ends them, he doesn't ask for your permission. He asks for your discernment. That's why listening carefully matters. If you miss this moment, you might keep fighting a war heaven already closed. So, don't rush. Don't skip. Don't assume you already know where this is going. Because if you listen, really listen, you may realize that what you thought was your breaking point is actually your release point. Stay with me. This isn't just encouragement. This is a turning point. What if the exhaustion you feel isn't because you're losing, but because heaven has already called time on the fight? What if the reason you can't push like you used to is because God never intended you to? Stay with me, because if you misread this moment, you might keep bleeding in a war that already ended. Let me start by saying something you may have never been told clearly. Not every battle is meant to last forever. I know you've been taught endurance. I know you've been praised for perseverance. I know people keep telling you, just keep pushing, just keep fighting. But I need you to understand this. God is not glorified by endless warfare. He is glorified by completed assignments. You see, there are battles God calls you to fight, and there are battles God calls you to finish. The danger is when you confuse a finishing season with a failing season. I've done that. I thought because I felt weak, I was losing. I thought because I didn't have the same fire to fight, I must be falling back. But heaven saw something different. Heaven saw completion, not defeat. That's why God declares in Isaiah 43:19, "Behold, I am doing a new thing." Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, "I am fixing the old thing." He doesn't say, "I am extending the old fight." He says new. New means transition. New means movement. New means the old season, no matter how intense, is no longer where he wants you living. Let me ask you something personal. Why are you still preparing for attacks that no longer come the same way? Why are you still guarding wounds God already healed? That constant alertness, that edge you live on, that's not strength anymore. That's exhaustion. And spiritual exhaustion is often the clearest evidence that war has reached its final phase. I've learned this the hard way. When God is calling you out of battle, your spirit gets tired of fighting things your soul was never meant to carry forever. You don't feel motivated to argue. You don't feel driven to defend yourself. You just feel done. And that done isn't quitting. It's discernment. Ecclesiastes 3 tells us there is a time for war and a time for peace. And listen carefully. God determines both. Not your enemies, not your circumstances, not even your past mistakes. So if God is shifting the time, why are you resisting the change? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some believers stay in warfare because it's familiar. You learn how to survive there. You learned how to pray there. You learn how to function under pressure. But familiarity does not mean permission. Just because you can survive there doesn't mean you're called to stay. Discernment is required in this moment. Discernment to recognize when God says, "Enough. The season is complete." Not because you're weak, but because the lesson was learned, the refinement was done, and the assignment has been fulfilled. So I want you to pause and ask yourself, not in fear, not in doubt, but honestly, what if the reason I feel empty is because I'm still pouring energy into a battle God already ended? Sit with that. Because recognizing the end of warfare is the first step into peace. And peace is not something you chase. It's something you enter when God opens the door. Here's the question you've been avoiding. What if the battle feels impossible because it was never yours to win? What if every ounce of effort you've spent was only revealing the moment God was waiting for you to let go? This shift changes everything if you're willing to hear it. Let me tell you something that might challenge how you've been living. Some battles you've been fighting were never meant to be won by your strength, your strategy, or your persistence. I know you've been trying harder. I know you've been staying up later, thinking more, planning more, praying louder, pushing deeper. I did the same. I thought if I just tried enough, God would finally step in. But the truth is, some battles don't respond to effort. They respond to surrender. There comes a moment when God allows pressure not to crush you, but to expose a truth. This is bigger than you. And that's not an insult. That's an invitation. An invitation to stop carrying what was never assigned to your hands. God allows certain fights to outgrow your abilities so that when deliverance comes, there's no confusion about where it came from. His glory, not your grind, gets the credit. I remember a season where nothing I did worked. Every solution failed. Every plan collapsed. And at first, I thought God was distant. But now I understand, He was removing my illusion of control. Because control feels like safety, but it's actually the heaviest burden you can carry. When God finally spoke to my spirit, it wasn't dramatic. It was simple. This one isn't yours. That's exactly what Scripture says in 2 Chronicles 20:15. The battle is not yours, but God's. That sentence changes everything, if you let it. It shifts responsibility. It shifts pressure. It shifts posture. If the battle is God's, why are you exhausted as if it depends on you? Why are you anxious as if the outcome rests on your performance? Here's the part most people don't like. Rest becomes an act of faith when striving no longer produces fruit. Rest is not laziness. Rest is obedience when God says, "Stop fighting me for control." When you keep pushing in a season God is asking you to trust, you don't speed things up, you delay peace. Exodus 14:14 says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Stillness isn't passive. Stillness is courageous. It takes more faith to stand still than to panic. More faith to wait than to interfere. More faith to believe God is moving even when you aren't. Victory doesn't begin when you figure everything out. Victory begins when you release the need to figure everything out. When control is surrendered, trust finally has room to breathe. And when trust breathes, God moves. So I need you to hear this personally. You are not failing because you're tired. You're tired because you've been fighting something God already took responsibility for. Let Him fight. Let Him finish. Your job was faith, not force. But once you stop fighting, what do you do with the version of you that learned how to survive under pressure? Who are you when the alarms go silent and the weapons fall from your hands? This is where many people get stuck. Don't miss this part. Here's another mistake many believers make, and I've made it too. After prolonged warfare, you start living in survival mode without realizing it. You don't dream anymore. You don't expect anymore. You don't plan for joy. You just brace for impact. You wake up asking, what do I need to get through today? Instead of what is God preparing me for? Survival mode keeps you alive, but it keeps you small. It trains your nervous system to expect loss, not promise. And while survival was necessary during the battle, it becomes dangerous after the battle ends. Because God doesn't deliver you just to keep you hiding. He delivers you so you can live. God is calling you out of survival thinking and into promise living. That shift is uncomfortable. Faith feels risky when you've been wounded. Hope feels foolish when you've been disappointed. But Hebrews 11:1 reminds us that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith doesn't wait for evidence, it creates it. I had to learn that emotional healing is just as important as spiritual victory. You can win the war and still live like you're under attack. You can be free and still flinch. That's why God doesn't just change circumstances. He heals memory. He heals fear. He heals expectation. Romans 8:18 says the suffering you've endured cannot compare to the glory that follows. But here's the catch. You have to be willing to receive the glory. Some people subconsciously reject good seasons because pain became familiar. But God never intended trauma to be your teacher forever. Faith prepares your heart to receive what the battle delayed, but did not cancel. Let me say that again slowly. Delayed does not mean deny. What you lost momentum on, what you paused dreaming about, what you thought was over, it may simply have been waiting for the war to end. So I ask you directly, who would you be if you weren't just surviving? How would you pray if you actually expected God to answer? How would you live if peace was normal again? Don't rush past these questions. They're keys. You're not being reckless by hoping again. You're being obedient. God doesn't rescue you to leave you cautious forever. He rescues you to restore bold faith. And just when you think peace is close, why does resistance suddenly spike? Why does discouragement get louder right before relief shows up? There's a reason for that. And once you see it, fear loses its grip. Let me expose something the enemy doesn't want you to understand. Increased resistance is not a sign you're losing. It's often proof that you're close. The enemy does not waste energy on battles he's already won. He fights hardest when his time is short. Revelation 12:12 tells us the enemy operates in desperation, knowing his defeat is certain. That means the pressure you felt recently, the sudden discouragement, the unexpected emotional weight, it wasn't random. It was resistance against your release. What felt like setback was actually interference. What felt like delay was disruption. The enemy sensed transition before you did. That's why discouragement came heavy. Because discouragement is his last tactic before losing ground. James 4:7 says when you submit to God, the enemy flees, not negotiates, not lingers, not returns stronger. Flees. That means the moment you stop fighting in your own strength and fully align with God's will, the enemy loses leverage. So if things intensified right before peace, don't panic. Don't assume it means more warfare is coming. Sometimes it means the war is ending and the enemy is making noise on the way out. You're not imagining the shift. You're not weak for feeling worn. You're standing at the edge of victory, and the noise is fading. Stay grounded. Stay submitted. Stay listening. Because what comes next isn't another fight. It's freedom. If the enemy fought you this hard on the way out, what does that say about what God is about to give back? What if the damage you're mourning was actually the setup for restoration you didn't think was possible? This is where the story turns. I need you to let this truth sink deep into your spirit, because many people believe the lie that even if God ends the battle, losses are permanent. That is not the God I know. That is not the God who carried you through the fire. God does not merely end wars. He restores what the war tried to steal. You didn't just lose time. You didn't just lose energy. You didn't just lose peace. You lost joy. You lost confidence. You lost parts of yourself you had before life got heavy. And if you're honest, sometimes you wonder, even if this season ends, will I ever be the same again? I've asked that question. I've sat with that fear. And this is what I learned. God never restores you back to who you were. He restores you forward into who you were always meant to become. Joel 2:25 carries a promise that feels almost too good to believe. God says He will restore the years that were eaten. Not the days. Not the moments. The years. That means nothing you endured was wasted. Not the sleepless nights. Not the silent tears. Not the strength it took just to keep going. Heaven kept record of it all. Restoration is not God handing you back scraps of what you lost. Restoration is God multiplying what survived. That's why when Job came out of his battle, Job 42:10 tells us God restored him double. Double peace. Double provision. Double clarity. The enemy thought he was stripping Job, but God was preparing him for overflow. Let me speak directly to you now. What drained you will no longer define you. The battle does not get the final word over your identity. You are not the one who went through hell. You are the one who came out refined. Stronger. Clearer. More grounded. And one day, you'll realize that the very season that almost broke you became the evidence of God's faithfulness. Restoration often comes quietly at first. It comes in moments of unexpected calm, in laughter that surprises you, in confidence that returns without effort, in peace that doesn't need explanation. And sometimes you don't even realize you're healed until you react differently to something that once destroyed you. You may think you lost too much. I promise you, God has more stored up than you can imagine. And what He gives back will not just replace what was taken. It will redeem it. Your story will no longer be about what you survived, but about how God kept you. So stop expecting a partial recovery. Stop bracing for disappointment. This is not damage control. This is divine restoration. And it's already in motion. So now the war is ending. But can you live without the fight? Can you trust peace when chaos trained you to stay alert? What comes next requires more faith than the battle ever did. Now listen carefully, because this is where many people hesitate. The end of the war introduces something unfamiliar: rest. And rest can feel uncomfortable when you've been living on adrenaline for too long. Silence can feel loud when chaos was your normal. Peace can feel suspicious when conflict shaped your instincts. But divine rest is not weakness. It is reward. When God ends a war, He doesn't push you immediately into another fight. He invites you into clarity, into stillness, into alignment. This is the season where your soul catches up to your spirit, where your body exhales, where your mind learns it doesn't have to stay on guard. Jesus said in John 16:33 that in this world you will have trouble, but in Him you will have peace. Peace is not the absence of problems, it's the presence of assurance. It's knowing that even if something rises, it won't rule you again. Victory now requires obedience of a different kind. Not the obedience of fighting harder, but the obedience of walking forward without fear of returning battles. Some of you are tempted to look back, to check if the enemy is still there, to keep emotional weapons close just in case. But God is calling you to move on, not monitor the past. Philippians 4:7 says, God's peace guards your heart and mind beyond understanding. That means peace becomes your protection now. Not anxiety, not overthinking, not hypervigilance. Peace. I know this feels unfamiliar. I know part of you wonders, what if the battle comes back? But hear me clearly, the season you're entering is not fragile. It's fortified by God Himself. What ended will not restart. What closed will not reopen. What finished its assignment no longer has access to you. This is not just the end of the fight. This is the beginning of purpose fulfilled. This is where clarity replaces confusion, where confidence replaces caution, where you stop surviving and start building. So I want you to do something intentional after this message. Take a breath, not a rushed one. A deep one. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your spirit hear this final truth. You are not in transition anymore. You are in arrival. The war is over. The lesson is complete. And peace is not coming someday. It's here. You don't need to brace yourself anymore. You don't need to stay alert, guarded, or tense. The same God who walked you through the war is now standing at the doorway of peace, inviting you to step in. This is not the moment to analyze. It's the moment to agree. So wherever you are, take a breath and pray this with me. Let these words become your words. Father God, I come to you right now acknowledging that you are the one who controls seasons. You decide when battles begin, and you decide when they end. Today, I agree with heaven that this war has reached its appointed end. I stop measuring my life by pain, and I start trusting your timing. I declare that what you finish cannot be reopened by fear. I honor you as the God who completes what He starts. Right now, I release every burden I've been carrying too long. I lay down exhaustion, overthinking, and the need to stay in control. I release the pressure to fight battles you never assigned to me. I let go of survival mode, stress responses, and emotional armor. I choose rest as an act of faith, not guilt. I trust you enough to stop striving. Father, remind me who I am beyond the battle. I am not broken. I am refined. I am not delayed. I am prepared. I am not weak. I am strengthened by what I survive. I reclaim my confidence, my clarity, and my joy. I step back into my identity as your child, not a wounded warrior. Today, I declare with my mouth and my spirit, this war is over. The assignment against my life is complete and canceled. Doors that were closed by God will not reopen. Cycles of struggle end here. The enemy has no legal access to my peace. I stand in victory, not because I fought harder, but because you fought for me. Now, Father, I receive what you are restoring. I receive peace that settles my mind. I receive joy that returns naturally. I receive healing in places I stopped talking about. I receive clarity for what comes next. I accept rest as my portion and peace as my covering. Finally, I align myself with this new season you are releasing. I move forward without fear of going backward. I walk in obedience, not hesitation. I trust you with what's next, even if I can't see it yet. I step into purpose with confidence, not caution. And I declare, this is not just the end of a battle, this is the beginning of fulfilled purpose. And now, don't rush away, because what God just sealed in prayer is only the beginning of what He wants to release through you. There is a weight on this moment, a quiet urgency from heaven, as if God is saying, stay, this matters more than you realize. What comes next is not separate from the message. It's part of how this victory is protected and multiplied. You need to understand this. When God ends a battle in your life, He often invites you to become a carrier of peace for someone else still fighting. I feel this strongly. You are not here by accident. As God is ending your war, He is asking if you will help carry this word to others who are still bleeding silently. Every time you give, you are sowing light into dark places, oil into dry hearts, and manna into souls that are barely holding on. I hear the Father saying, I place this desire in you because I trust you with impact. This is not charity, it's assignment. What you release now will return as protection, multiplication, and favor over your house. The harvest attached to this seed is not small. Don't delay what heaven has already prompted. Act now, give now, and partner with what God is doing through this word. Now listen, this is important. I want you to hype this video right now. When you hype it, you are declaring that this message matters, that the war truly is over, and that others need to hear it before they give up. Hyping this video is not noise, it's prophecy in motion. And yes, like the video too, but understand this. Every action you take here helps push this word into the hands of someone who desperately needs to hear that God is ending their battle. Before you go, I want you to do one more thing. In the comments, declare this boldly: the war is over. God has finished this season. Let your words be a testimony even before the evidence shows up. And if you're carrying a specific prayer request, something you've been fighting alone, write it down. We will stand with you, we will pray for you, and we will believe with you until peace fully manifests. If you desire a daily altar where God meets you with peace, courage, and direction, subscribe to this channel and walk this journey with us. Amen.